or men 50 plus, the number one muscle you must train for higher testosterone and energy. Introduction: the hidden lever for vitality. After 50, if you're a man over 50, you've likely noticed subtle shifts in your body that weren't part of the aging script you imagined. The morning energy that used to carry you through back-to-back meetings now requires a second cup of coffee. The recovery from a weekend hike takes longer. The scale might not have moved dramatically, but the mirror tells a different story. Less definition, softer edges, a quiet loss of strength that creeps in when you're not looking. And beneath it all, there's often an unspoken question. Is this just normal aging, or is something deeper slipping away? For decades, the medical and fitness industries told men that declining energy, shrinking muscle mass, and dropping testosterone were inevitable consequences of crossing the half-century mark. You were told to accept it, adapt to it, or, in the worst cases, turn to synthetic replacements that came with their own set of risks and dependencies. But modern physiology, endocrinology, and exercise science have dismantled that fatalistic narrative. Aging is not a sentence to gradual decline. It is a physiological transition that can be actively managed, optimized, and even reversed in meaningful ways. The truth is that testosterone doesn't simply vanish at 50, it responds to demand. And the most powerful, scientifically validated demand signal you can send to your endocrine system is mechanical tension applied to your largest, most metabolically active muscle groups. When you understand how muscle tissue communicates with your hormonal axis, how resistance training stimulates free testosterone production, and how strategic strength work rebuilds mitochondrial density and neural drive, the path forward becomes remarkably clear. This isn't about chasing quick fixes, spending hours on isolated machine workouts, or falling for the myth that endless cardio burns away hormonal decline. It's about precision. It's about recognizing that one muscle group, more than any other, acts as the central hub for systemic hormonal optimization, metabolic renewal, and sustainable energy production in men over 50. Train it correctly, consistently, and intelligently, and you won't just preserve your vitality, you'll actively rebuild it. In the pages that follow, we will unpack the biology of testosterone and aging, explore why muscle mass is the most accurate predictor of hormonal health in midlife, identify the specific muscle group that drives the greatest endocrine response, and provide a complete, evidence-based framework for training, nutrition, recovery, and lifestyle integration. You'll learn how to program workouts that respect joint health while maximizing hormonal output, how to fuel your body to support natural testosterone synthesis, how to sleep and recover in ways that amplify free testosterone, and how to avoid the most common pitfalls that stall progress. Most importantly, you'll discover how to build a sustainable, lifelong practice that doesn't just add years to your life, but life to your years. This guide is written for men who are done with shortcuts, done with guesswork, and ready to take systematic, science-backed control of their health. If you're over 50 and committed to reclaiming your strength, energy, and hormonal vitality, you're in the right place. Let's begin. Part 1. The biology of testosterone and aging in men, 50 plus. To understand how training influences testosterone, we must first understand what testosterone is, how it's produced, and why it naturally shifts as men age. Testosterone is not merely a manhood hormone tied to aggression or libido. It is a master regulator of metabolic health, muscle protein synthesis, bone density, cognitive function, red blood cell production, mood stability, and cardiovascular resilience. It operates as a systemic signaling molecule, telling your cells how to grow, repair, and function. The hypothalamic pituitary gonadal, HPG, axis testosterone production begins in the brain. The hypothalamus releases gonadotropin-releasing hormone, GnRH, which signals the pituitary gland to secrete luteinizing hormone, LH, and follicle-stimulating hormone, FSH. LH travels through the bloodstream to the Leydig cells in the testes, where it triggers the enzymatic conversion of cholesterol into testosterone. This entire cascade is known as the HPG axis, and it functions on a negative feedback loop. When testosterone levels are adequate, the brain reduces GnRH and LH production. When levels drop, the brain increases signaling to restore balance. As men age, multiple components of this axis experience gradual wear. The hypothalamus becomes less sensitive to hormonal feedback, the pituitary's LH pulses become less frequent and robust, and Leydig cell responsiveness declines. Studies show that Leydig cell numbers decrease by approximately 15–20% between ages 40 and 70, and the remaining cells produce less testosterone per LH signal. Additionally, sex hormone-binding globulin, SHBG, tends to rise with age, binding more circulating testosterone and reducing the fraction that is free and biologically active. The result is a steady decline in both total and free testosterone, typically averaging 1–2% per year after age 30, with a more pronounced drop often occurring after 50. Symptoms versus pathology. It's crucial to distinguish between natural, age-related hormonal shifts and clinical hypogonadism. Many men experience mild declines in energy, recovery, and muscle retention without falling into pathological ranges. Symptoms like fatigue, reduced motivation, slower recovery, increased abdominal fat, decreased bone density, and subtle mood. Shifts are common but not inevitable. They represent a mismatch between physiological demand and lifestyle input. When mechanical stress, resistance training, nutritional support, sleep quality, and stress management are optimized, the HPG axis responds favorably. The body doesn't produce hormones in a vacuum, it produces them in response to need. The role of muscle in hormonal regulation. Skeletal muscle is not just a contractile tissue, it is a dynamic endocrine organ. When you contract muscle fibers, especially under load, they release signaling proteins called myokines. Interleukin-6, IL-6, irisin, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, and myostatin inhibitors all play roles in metabolism, inflammation regulation, neuroplasticity, and hormonal balance. Resistance training increases insulin sensitivity, reduces chronic low-grade inflammation, and improves hepatic clearance of excess estrogen and SHBG, indirectly supporting free testosterone availability. Furthermore, muscle tissue acts as a glucose and lipid sink. Greater lean mass improves metabolic flexibility, which stabilizes blood sugar, reduces visceral fat accumulation, and lowers aromatase activity. Aromatase is the enzyme that converts testosterone into estrogen, and it is highly concentrated in adipose tissue, particularly visceral fat. By preserving and building muscle while managing body composition, men over 50 create a physiological environment that naturally favors higher free testosterone and lower estrogen dominance. Why the 50-plus window matters. The decade between 50 and 60 is a physiological crossroads. Sarcopenia, age-related muscle loss, accelerates if not actively resisted. Bone mineral density begins its steady decline. Mitochondrial efficiency drops, reducing cellular energy production. Hormonal responsiveness becomes more dependent on consistent mechanical and metabolic stimulation. But this is also the decade where intervention yields the highest return. Studies consistently show that men over 50 who engage in progressive resistance training experience significant improvements in free testosterone, IGF-1, growth hormone pulsatility, insulin sensitivity, and cardiovascular markers. The body retains its adaptive capacity. It simply requires the right stimulus, adequate recovery, and strategic nutrition. Understanding this biology removes the mystery from hormonal decline. It shifts the narrative from passive acceptance to active optimization. And at the center of that optimization is one fundamental truth. Your muscles are not just tools for movement, they are the primary regulators of your endocrine environment. The question is no longer if you should train them, but which ones to prioritize, how to train them, and how to align your entire lifestyle with the goal of sustained hormonal vitality. Part 2. Why muscle matters for hormones and energy. Muscle is the metabolic engine of the human body. It consumes the majority of glucose at rest, stores glycogen for high-intensity output, and dictates basal metabolic rate more than any other tissue. But beyond its role in energy expenditure, muscle tissue is deeply intertwined with hormonal production, neural drive, and systemic vitality. For men over 50, preserving and building muscle isn't about aesthetics. It's about physiological survival and quality of life. Muscle as an endocrine organ. When you lift weights, you're not just tearing muscle fibers to rebuild them stronger. You're triggering a cascade of systemic responses. Mechanical tension activates mechanotransduction pathways that signal the mTOR, mammalian target of rapamycin pathway, driving protein synthesis and cellular repair. Simultaneously, muscle contraction stimulates the release of myokines that communicate with the liver, brain, adipose tissue, and endocrine glands. IL-6, released during exercise, paradoxically acts as an anti-inflammatory signal when elevated, acutely improving insulin sensitivity and mobilizing fat stores. Irisin, another myokine, promotes browning of white adipose tissue, increasing thermogenesis and metabolic rate. More importantly, resistance training modulates the HPG axis. Acute. Bouts of heavy compound resistance exercise trigger transient